11 years after the Declaration was approved in 1776. The following is from the preamble of the Constitution. We the people do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. It was here that the crime of our founding fathers was first started, because the founding fathers actually created two separate governments inside the Constitution, and they gave one of them absolute tyrannical power. So they had to build a front to conceal their crime. The best way that I can illustrate that might be showing you a theme park called Old Tucson, located outside of Tucson, Arizona. Here in 1939, in the desert outside of Tucson, the makers of the movie Arizona constructed a movie set out of adobe mud for the movie. It was later transformed into a theme park called Old Tucson. The owners have covered up many of the original mud adobe buildings with wood frame buildings that make the city look as if it had been built in the 1880s. As long as you walk down the main street of the park, the buildings look real. But many of these buildings are nothing more than a front with no sides, floor, or roof, but they give the appearance from the front of being a completed building. Take, for instance, this church building. This is, of course, the front view. And this is the back view. There is no building, but from the front it looks like a complete building. As long as we look at the Constitution without examining it, we see the magnificence of the document. But if we look behind the words, as we are going to do in a minute, we find that it is all a false front, just like some of the buildings in Old Tucson. The founding fathers built a set like Old Tucson around the Constitution. We see the false front and think that that is the Constitution. But those who walk around back and see the false front of the document know that we have bought some more fire engines and other grain. The founding fathers had to construct this elaborate facade so that anyone who read the Constitution would see the aged man and his reflection and not the demon God. They were to see the power being divided and not the power being centralized. And because of this, we the people have missed the fatal flaw, the one that was intentionally placed in the Constitution so that it would later destroy the very rights it was intended to protect. It is my opinion now that the Constitution is the most oppressive document ever written by the mind of man. Article 1 of the Constitution created the legislative branch, Article 2 created the executive branch, and Article 3 created the judicial branch. We have been told that that was to divide the power and not give too much power to any one branch of the government. And it is in Section 8 of Article 1 that the founders granted the legislative branch 18 specific powers. These are listed one after the other. This reads in part, Congress shall have the power to collect taxes, to coin money, to establish post offices, to declare war, for instance. These are very specific powers, meaning that our founding fathers gave them these and only these powers. Or so we've been told, but we have been lied to. This is what they wrote in part in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17, as they were granting powers to Congress. Congress shall have power to exercise exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever. Notice that the Founding Fathers used the very same phrase, the power to legislate in all cases whatsoever, that they used in the Declaration of Independence to define the tyrannical power of King George. They gave Congress the power to legislate in all cases whatsoever. That means that they gave Congress tyrannical power. The Constitution was written only 11 years after the writing of the Declaration, and many of the people signing the Declaration also signed the Constitution. It is impossible not to conclude that the Founding Fathers gave Congress tyrannical power. They did so in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17. Now it is important to notice that the writers of the Constitution did restrict that tyrannical power to just one place, Washington, D.C. They wrote, Congress shall have the power to exercise exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever over such district as may become the seat of the government of the United States. So the original intent was to limit this tyrannical power just to, quote, the seat of the government of the United States, which was in Washington, D.C. It is also important to recall that the Constitution was written by the people of the United States of America. So they wrote about both the United States and the United States of America. This tyrannical power extended only over the 10-mile square of Washington, D.C. They have limited power in the United States of America. That means there are two constitutional governments in America, the United States of America and the United States. There was not much concern with the tyrannical power of the United States until the 13th and 14th Amendments were passed in 1865 and 1868 after the Civil War. Let's examine the 13th Amendment first. It reads, quote, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude except as a punishment for crime, meaning we can make a slave and call him a prisoner, shall exist within the United States. Now, slavery is a situation where one person has lost his freedom to another. A synonym of slavery is involuntary servitude, meaning when a person is forced to serve another without the first person's consent. Involuntary means that the person doesn't want to do what he is being forced to do. But notice that by these two definitions, voluntary servitude is permissible. That means that we are free to voluntarily become a slave. Only involuntary servitude is not permitted. If you want to become a slave, you are free to do so. Now, with that understanding,